Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Defiant. His brown eyes stared at the screen in front of him. For 6 months, the same message had been playing across 17 different star systems. It was a cry for help that reached across the darkness of space. The message was simple, but desperate. It came from something called the Kythera Coalition. These aliens were asking anyone who could hear them to come and save them. They were dying, and they needed help fast. Jake had heard many distress calls in his 20 years as a ship captain. Most came from human ships that had broken down or gotten lost. This came from aliens who lived on 3 different worlds, and they were all about to be wiped out. Commander Lisa Bennett walked up to Jake. She was tall and had short black hair. In her hands, she carried a thick folder full of reports. Her face looked serious, which meant the news was bad. "Captain, I have the latest information about the Vrak Imperium," she said. "Worse than we thought. We're safe." Jake took the folder and opened it. Inside were pictures and data about the aliens who were attacking the Coalition. Vrak looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They were twice as tall as humans and covered in thick scales that looked like armor. But what made them really dangerous was how they thought. The Vrak believed that only the strong should live. They thought that being kind or showing mercy was weak. They had been moving from world to world, taking everything they wanted. They would capture the people who lived there and make them slaves. Then they would take all the metals, water, and food from the planet until nothing was left. "How many worlds have they taken?" Jake asked. 43, Lisa answered. "And they show no signs of stopping. They move like a machine, Captain. They hit a world hard and fast, break their defenses, then move on to the next one." Jake closed the folder and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of innocent people were dying. The Coalition species had sent their message to anyone who would listen, hoping that someone, somewhere, would be strong enough to help them. Dr. Amy Collins entered the bridge. She was the ship's expert on alien life. Amy was small and had red hair that she always kept in a ponytail. She spent most of her time studying the Coalition species, trying to understand who they were and what made them special. "Captain, I have finished my report on the Coalition races," she said, walking over to them. "Tell me about them, Doc." "Jake," said Dot. Amy pulled out her tablet and began to read. "There are 3 species in the Coalition. The Kythera are the leaders. They look like tall, thin people made of crystal. They are peaceful traders who love to learn about other cultures. They have never fought a war in their entire history." She swiped to the next page. "The Zilani are the scientists. They are small and have big heads with large eyes. They are incredibly smart and have created amazing technology. But they use their inventions to help people, not hurt them." "And the 3rd species?" Lisa asked. The Morvic Amy continued. "They are artists and builders. They create the most beautiful things in the galaxy. Their cities look like works of art, but like the others, they have never learned how to fight." Jake nodded slowly. He was starting to understand the problem. These 3 species had lived on worlds that were safe and comfortable. They had never faced real danger. They had never learned that sometimes you have to fight to protect what you love. "What are their worlds like?" he asked. Amy smiled sadly. "Paradise, Captain. The Kythera homeworld has perfect weather all year round. It never gets too hot or too cold. They don't have earthquakes or storms. The worst thing that happens to them is when it rains too much and their flowers get too much water." She showed them pictures of beautiful cities with crystal towers that reached toward the sky. Gardens filled with strange and wonderful plants surrounded every building. Rivers of clean water flowed through the streets like silver ribbons. "The Zilani world is similar," she continued. "It's covered in vast libraries and research centers. They have floating cities that drift through clouds. Everything is designed to help them think and learn. They have never had to worry about finding food or staying safe from dangerous animals." The last pictures showed the Morvic world. It looked like someone had taken a giant paintbrush and painted everything in bright, happy colors. Buildings curved and spiraled like living things. Art covered every surface, and music could be heard floating through the air. They don't understand what real danger looks like, Jake said quietly. They have never had to fight for their lives. Right, Amy agreed. When the Vrak first attacked, the Coalition tried to talk to them. They offered to share their technology and knowledge. They thought they could make friends. Lisa shook her head. The Vrak don't want friends. They want slaves and resources. Jake walked over to the big window that looked out into space. Earth was far behind them now, but he could still remember what it was like. Earth was not like the Coalition worlds. Earth was a world that tried to kill you every single day. Humans had survived ice ages that froze most of the planet for thousands of years. They had lived through volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. They had faced earthquakes that could split mountains in half, and hurricanes that could level entire cities. But it wasn't just the weather that made Earth dangerous. There were animals with claws and fangs that hunted humans for food. There were tiny germs that could kill millions of people. There were poisonous snakes, angry bears, and sharks with teeth like knives. For millions of years, Earth had tried to kill humanity, and for millions of years, humans had refused to die. They learned to make tools and weapons. They learned to work together to survive. They learned that sometimes the only way to protect your family was to be more dangerous than the things that wanted to hurt them. Captain, Lisa said, breaking him out of his thoughts, Earth Command wants to know our decision. Will we answer the Coalition's call for help? Jake turned back to face his crew. These were good people who had chosen to leave their safe homes on Earth and travel to the dangerous places between the stars. They were explorers, fighters, and protectors. They were human. The Coalition doesn't know what they're asking for, he said slowly. They sent out a call for help, hoping someone would come save them. They probably expect to meet another peaceful species like themselves. He looked at the pictures of the beautiful, safe worlds that were now under attack. Then he thought about Earth, with its storms and predators and endless dangers. They have no idea that their message reached a species that was forged by the deadliest world in the galaxy. They don't know that every human on this ship is descended from millions of years of survivors. They don't know that we learned how to fight by facing things that would give their worst nightmares nightmares. Amy and Lisa exchanged glances. They could see where this was going. But Captain Amy said carefully, we're not like the Vrak. We don't conquer and destroy. We protect and help. Jake smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that had found its prey. You're right, Doc. We're not like the Vrak at all. We're something much more dangerous. We're survivors who learned that the only way to keep the things we love safe is to make sure the bad guys are more afraid of us than we are of them. He turned to Lisa. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them that the UES Defiant is answering the Coalition's call for help. And send a message to the Coalition too. What should we tell them? Lisa asked. Tell them that help is coming, Jake said. But don't tell them what kind of help. Let it be a surprise. As the Defiant changed course toward the Coalition worlds, none of them knew that this moment would change the galaxy forever. The peaceful species of the Coalition were about to learn what happened when Earth's deadliest Deathworlders decided to get involved in a war. The UES Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathora Prime system. What Captain Jake Morrison saw made his jaw clench with anger. The beautiful blue and green world that Dr. Amy Collins had shown him in pictures was under attack. Massive. Vrak ships hung in space like dark metal monsters. They were 3 times bigger than the Defiant and covered with weapon ports that glowed red in the darkness. These ships were firing down at the planet, turning cities into burning ruins. Smaller Vrak fighters swooped through the atmosphere like angry wasps, shooting at anything that moved. My God, whispered Lieutenant Ryan Clark from his position. At the communications station, Ryan was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair and blue eyes. He had joined the crew straight from the academy and had never seen real war before. Captain, there are hundreds of them. Jake studied the tactical display on his screen. The Vrak had 47 warships in the system. Most were big destroyers and cruisers. 3 were massive dreadnoughts that looked like they could crack a planet in half. Against all of this, the Defiant was alone. Sir, said Commander Lisa Bennett, the odds are not in our favor. Since when have humans ever cared about odds? Jake replied with a grim smile. Ryan, try to contact any coalition survivors. Patch it through the speakers. I want everyone to hear this. Ryan's fingers flew over his controls. Static filled. The bridge, mixed with the sounds of explosions and screaming. Finally, a voice came through. Sounded like wind chimes being played by a gentle breeze, but there was terror in it. Unknown vessel. Unknown vessel. This is Ambassador Thurn of the Kithera Coalition. If anyone can hear this, we are under attack. Our orbital defenses are destroyed. Our fleet is scattered. Millions are dying. Please, if there's anyone out there who can help us, we are begging you. Voice broke with emotion. In the background, they could hear explosions getting closer. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiant, Jake responded. We received your distress call, Ambassador. We're here to help. The silence that followed lasted for almost 30 seconds. When then spoke again, his voice was filled with confusion and hope. Earthship, we do not know this world called Earth. Are you the ones who answered our message? But, your ship, it appears to be built for war, we thought. We hoped for peacekeepers, diplomats, maybe traders with defensive capabilities. Dr. Collins stepped forward. She had been studying the coalition languages for months and could speak some Kithera words. Her voice was gentle but firm. Ambassador. Thurin, this is Dr. Amy Collins. We're from a world called Earth. We heard your cry for help and we came as fast as we could. But you need to understand something about us before we begin. What do you mean? Thurin asked. Jake took over the conversation. His voice carried the weight of authority that came from years of command, but also something else. Something that made even his own crew pay closer attention. Ambassador, every human on this ship comes from what you would call a death world. For millions of years, our planet tried to kill us in every way possible. We survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years. We lived through volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. We faced storms that could destroy entire cities and earthquakes that could split the ground open. Tharin's voice was very quiet. I do not understand. What is a death world? Dr. Collins answered. A world where everything is trying to kill you, Ambassador. On Earth, we have animals with claws that can cut through metal and teeth that can crush bones. We have tiny creatures called bacteria and viruses that can kill millions of people. We have weather that can freeze you solid or burn you alive. But how did you survive? Another voice asked. This one sounded different, like music played on glass instruments. It had to be one of the other coalition species. We learned to fight back, Jake said simply. We learned to make weapons and tools. We learned to work together. We learned that sometimes to protect the people you love, you have to become more dangerous than the things that want to hurt them. The bridge of the Defiant was very quiet now. Everyone was listening to this conversation that would change everything. You were saying, Thurin said slowly, that your entire species are warriors? No, Jake replied, and his voice was cold as a winter morning. We're something much more dangerous than warriors, Ambassador. Warriors fight for honor or glory or conquest. We fight for survival. We fight because if we don't, everyone we care about dies, and we never, ever give up. On the tactical screen, one of the Vrak dreadnoughts had noticed the Defiant. It was turning toward them, its weapons charging. Ambassador, Jake continued, we need you to listen very carefully. We're going to save your people, but we're going to do it the human way. It means things are going to get very violent very quickly. Keep your people in their shelters and stay off the radio unless it's an emergency. Captain Morrison, Thurin said, and now his voice carried a note of fear. There are dozens of Vrak ships. You are only one vessel. Surely you do not plan to fight them all. Lieutenant Kelly Hayes, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from her station. Kelly was a small woman with dark skin and fierce eyes. She had grown up on Mars Colony and had been fighting pirates and smugglers since she was old enough to hold a weapon. Captain, she said with a sharp smile, the big ugly one is locking weapons on us. Permission to show them what human engineering looks like? Granted, Jake said. But remember, we want survivors to question later. Try not to vaporize all of them. The Vrak dreadnought fired first. Massive energy beams lanced through space, toward the Defiant, but the human ship was already moving. Jake had spent years studying alien tactics, and he knew that most species fought like they lived. The Vrak were big, strong, and direct, expected their enemies to stand still and trade shots like two boxers in a ring. Humans had learned to fight dirty. The Defiant spun and rolled, avoiding the Vrak weapons by inches. As it moved, it fired back, but not at the dreadnought. Instead, it targeted the smaller support ships around the big vessel. Human weapons were different from anything the Vrak had ever seen. They didn't just explode. They sent out clouds of metal fragments that ripped through armor like paper. "What are they doing?" came a new voice over the radio. This had to be a Vrak officer, speaking in their own language.
Ryan's computer translated it automatically. "Yeah, they're not fighting like any species we know."
Another Vrak voice answered. "They should be trying to match our firepower with their own instead there, dancing around us like insects." Dr. Collins had been working on something while the fight started. She looked up from her computer with a strange expression. "Captain," she said, "I've been analyzing Vrak psychology based on their communications and behavior patterns. They're apex predators from their homeworld. They've never faced another predator species. They don't understand what's happening because they've never been hunted before." Jake nodded. "Then it's time they learned. Ryan, open a channel to all Vrak ships in the system." "Channel open, sir." "Attention Vrak fleet," Jake said, and his voice was broadcast to every enemy ship in the system. "This is Captain Morrison of Earth. You have attacked innocent people who never hurt you. You have destroyed their cities and enslaved their children. By the laws of Earth, that makes you our enemies." The tactical display showed the Vrak fleet starting to turn toward the Defiant. All 47 ships were now focused on the single human vessel. "We know you think you're the strongest predators in the galaxy," Jake continued. "We know you believe that might makes right, and that the weak deserve to die. We want you to understand something important before we begin." Major Chris Parker, the leader of the ship's Marines, stepped onto the bridge. Chris was a big man with scars on his hands and arms from a dozen different battles. He had been born on Earth and had grown up hunting real predators in the Amazon jungle. "Sir," he said quietly, "my boys are ready for whatever comes next." Jake nodded and continued speaking to the Vrak. "You come from a world where you were the apex predators? You never had to worry about something hunting you. Earth is different. On Earth, everything hunts everything else. We learned to survive by becoming better predators than anything our world could throw at us." The lead Vrak dreadnought was getting closer. Its captain was probably getting ready to blast the small human ship into pieces. "You want to know what real predators sound like?" Jake asked. Dr. Collins activated the recording she had been preparing. Suddenly, the radio channel filled with sounds from Earth, the roar of a lion that could be heard for miles, the scream of an eagle diving on its prey, the howl of wolves hunting in a pack, and underneath it all, something that made even the human crew smile grimly: human laughter. The silence from the Vrak fleet lasted for almost a minute. When someone finally spoke, his voice was different, uncertain. "What ... What are those sounds?" "Those," Jake said, "are the sounds of Earth's predators, and the laughter you hear. That's the sound humans make when we're about to show you why. Our planet made us the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The Defiant suddenly accelerated straight toward the Vrak fleet. But instead of heading for the big ships that could hurt it, it dove toward the smaller fighters that were attacking the planet. Admiral Kresh stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher. He was 8 feet tall and covered in dark green scales that were harder than steel. His yellow eyes watched the small alien ship dart between his fighters like a minnow swimming between sharks. Kresh had conquered 14 star systems without ever losing a single battle. His warriors were the strongest in the galaxy. His ships carried enough firepower to crack planets. No species had ever dared to challenge the Vrak Imperium alone. Until now, what are they doing? Growled Commander Vex, Kresh's second-in-command. Vex was smaller than the Admiral, but twice as mean. His claws were always sharp and ready for battle. They should be dead already, Kresh replied, his voice like grinding stone. One small ship against our entire fleet. They should have been destroyed the moment they entered our weapons range. But the human ship was not dead. Instead, it was moving in ways that no Vruk had ever seen before. It twisted and spun through space like it was dancing. Every time a Vrak ship fired at it, the Defiant was already somewhere else. Captain Jake Morrison stood calmly on his bridge while chaos erupted around him. Explosions lit up the space outside his ship. Energy beams cut through the darkness like deadly lightning. But Jake looked like he was taking a quiet walk in a park. "Kelly, status report," he said to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Kelly Hayes was working at her station with the focus of a surgeon. Her fingers moved over the controls without wasting a single motion. "We've destroyed 12 of their fighters, Captain. No damage to us yet. Their weapons are powerful but slow. They're built for fighting opponents who stand still and trade shots."
Right.
"Just like we thought," Jake nodded. "They fight like they live. Big, strong, and direct." "Ryan, are you recording all their communications?" Lieutenant Ryan Clark was listening to dozens of RAC radio channels at once. His computer was translating everything in real time. "Yes, sir." "They're getting frustrated. Listen to this." He played back a recording of RAC voices. The computer changed their hissing words into English. "Why won't they fight us properly? They keep running away like cowards," another voice answered. "Our weapons should have destroyed them 10 times over. How are they still alive?" Dr. Amy Collins looked up from her analysis station. "Captain, I'm monitoring Vrak stress patterns through their voice communications. They're experiencing something they've never felt before. Fear." Major Chris Parker laughed from his position near the door. "Good. Scared enemies make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, we make them pay for it." Jake turned to his communications officer. "Ryan, patch me through to the Vrak command ship. I want to talk to whoever is in charge of this mess." "Channel open, sir." Jake's voice was broadcast to every ship in the Vrak fleet. "This is Captain Morrison. I want to speak to the Admiral who thinks he can attack innocent people and get away with it." The reply came quickly. Admiral Kresh's voice was full of anger and confusion. "I am Admiral Kresh of the Vrak Imperium. You will surrender your ship immediately, or we will destroy you." "Admiral Kresh," Jake said, and now his voice carried the cold patience of a hunter. "Let me explain something to you. You attack species that can't fight back. You pick on the weak because it makes you feel strong. Where I come from, we have a word for creatures like you." "What word?" Kresh demanded. "Bullies," Jake replied. "And on Earth, we learned a long time ago how to deal with bullies." The Defiant suddenly changed direction. Instead of running from the Vrak ships, it accelerated straight toward Admiral Kresh's flagship. But at the last second, it dove underneath the massive vessel and disappeared from view. "Where did it go?" Vex shouted. "Find it," Kresh roared. "All ships, find that pest and crush it." But the Defiant was not hiding. It was hunting. The human ship had positioned itself in the shadow of the Bone Crusher, where the big ship's weapons could not reach it. From there, it began targeting the Vrak fleet's weak points. Not their weapons or armor, but their communication arrays and sensor systems. "Kelly, target their eyes and ears," Jake ordered. "I want them blind and deaf." "With pleasure, Captain." The Defiant's weapons were different from anything the Vrak had ever encountered. Instead of trying to punch through heavy armor, they sent out clouds of tiny metal fragments that moved at incredible speed. These fragments cut through sensor dishes and communication equipment like invisible knives. Within minutes, half the Vrak fleet could not see or talk to each other. "What are they doing to us?" a Vrak captain screamed over the radio. "They're not trying to destroy us," another voice replied with growing panic. "They're making us helpless." Dr. Collins was analyzing the Vrak responses with scientific interest. "Captain, their psychology is fascinating. They're apex predators who have never been hunted before. They don't understand tactics that don't involve direct confrontation. That's their weakness," Jake said. "They think strength is just about having bigger weapons and thicker armor. They never learn that the smartest predator usually wins." The Defiant moved through the Vrak fleet like a ghost. It would appear, strike at a target, then vanish before the enemy could respond. Each attack was carefully planned to cause maximum confusion with minimum risk to coalition civilians on the planet below. But Jake's real genius was not in the space battle. It was in the psychological war he was fighting inside the Vrak minds. Ryan, start broadcasting on all Vrak frequencies. I want every warrior in their fleet to hear this. What should I broadcast, sir? Jake smiled grimly. The sounds of Earth. Dr. Collins had prepared a special recording. It started with the deep roar of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, the king of predators from Earth's ancient past. Then came the howl of wolves hunting in packs, the scream of eagles diving from the sky, the hiss of venomous snakes ready to strike. But the sound that made even the human crew shiver was the laughter. Human laughter recorded from soldiers who had survived the worst battles Earth could offer. It was the sound of predators who enjoyed the hunt. The effect on the Vrak was immediate and devastating. Turn it off, Admiral Kresh screamed. Turn off those horrible sounds. But the sounds kept coming. Every time a Vrak ship tried to change frequencies, the human recordings followed them. They could not escape the voices of Earth's predators. Sir, Commander Vex said, his voice shaking, the crew is asking questions. They want to know what kind of creatures make sounds like that. They're just animals, as Kresh roared. But even he sounded uncertain. Animals that learn to laugh while they hunt? Jake's voice came over the radio. Animals that turned a world of nightmares into their home? Animals that never learned to give up. The turning point came when 3 Vrak fighters finally managed to hit the Defiant with their weapons. The human ship's shields flared and sparked, but it did not slow down or retreat. Instead, it turned toward its attackers like a wounded predator that had just gotten angry. Impossible, breathed one of the Vrak pilots. We hit them directly. They should be crippled. Human ships are built different. Jake broadcast to all the Vrak vessels. Don't build them pretty. We build them tough. Because on Earth, pretty things die first. The Defiant launched something the Vrak had never seen before. Instead of missiles or energy beams, it fired small pods that attached to the hulls of enemy ships. The Vrak crews watched in confusion as these pods did nothing. What are those? Vex asked. His answer came 30 seconds later when Major Parker's voice filled the Vrak communications. Attention, Vrak forces. This is Major Chris Parker of the Earth Marines. Those pods you're looking at contain boarding teams. We're coming aboard your ships now. The pods opened, and human Marines poured out. They moved across the Vrak ship hulls. In powered armor that let them walk in the vacuum of space. The Vrak had never faced boarding actions before. They were used to ship combat, not warriors who came aboard their vessels to fight hand-to-hand. Seal the airlocks, Kresh ordered. Don't let them inside. But the humans had brought tools that could cut through Vrak armor like butter. They burned their way through hull plating and entered the ships. Through holes that appeared faster than the Vrak could react. Inside the ships, Vrak warriors got their first close look at Earth's Deathworlders. The humans were smaller than the Vrak, but moved like liquid lightning. They used the ship's own structure as weapons, turning corridors into traps and using gravity and momentum in ways the Vrak had never imagined. Every shadow could hide a human warrior. Every corner could become an ambush. But worst of all, the humans were clearly enjoying themselves. This is fun, came Major Parker's voice over the radio. Hey, Captain, these lizards are tougher than they look, but they don't know how to fight in close quarters. They're used to overwhelming their enemies with superior numbers and firepower. Copy that, Major. How long do you need? Give me 10 more minutes, and I'll have control of their flagship's weapon systems. 8. Admiral Kresh stared at his status displays in growing horror. Red warning lights were flashing all over his ship. Human Marines were moving through his vessel like a plague, taking control of critical systems and capturing his warriors. This is impossible, he whispered. How can such small creatures defeat Vrak warriors? His answer came from Dr. Collins, who had been listening to everything. Because, Admiral, you're not fighting just another species. Word spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. The impossible had happened. A single human ship had defeated an entire Vrak fleet. The survivors were telling stories that sounded like myths. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command. Center on Kithra Prime, 3 days after the battle ended. The beautiful crystal city around him was damaged, but not destroyed. Smoke still rose from some buildings, but the people were alive. More importantly, they were learning. Ambassador. Theron approached Jake with careful steps. The tall, crystal-like alien moved differently now. Before the humans arrived, Theron had walked with the grace of someone who had never known real danger. Now he moved like someone who understood that the universe was a dangerous place. "Captain Morrison," Theron said, his voice like wind chimes. "In a gentle breeze, we have received communications from across the galaxy. Other species want to know what happened here. They want to know how we defeated the Vrak." "What are you telling them?" Jake asked. "The truth," Theron replied. "That we learned something we never knew before. We learned that survival is not about being the strongest or the most peaceful. It is about being willing to change when change is needed." Dr. Amy Collins was working at a nearby station, analyzing data from the battle. She looked up from her computer with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, you need to see this. The Coalition species are adapting faster than I thought possible." She showed him video recordings from around the planet. Kithra civilians were practicing things they had never done before. They were learning to hide, to move quietly, to work together in small groups. The Zilani scientists were studying human military tactics like they were solving mathematical puzzles. The Morvic artists were using their creative skills to design traps and defensive positions. "This is remarkable," Amy continued. "These species are developing survival instincts in days that took humanity millions of years to evolve. But they're doing it through learning instead of evolution." Commander Susan Wright, who had taken over as the Defiant's executive officer while Lisa recovered from injuries, walked over to join them. Susan was a tough woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in more battles than most people could count. "Captain," she said, "we're getting reports from all over Coalition space. The Vrak are pulling back from their forward positions. They're confused and scared. Some of their commanders are asking for peace talks." Jake nodded. "That's good, but it's not enough. The Vrak will regroup and come back stronger. We need to teach the Coalition how to make sure that never happens." A new voice joined the conversation. It belonged to Jorik, a Morvic engineer who had escaped from a Vrak prison camp during the battle. Jorik looked like a living sculpture made of silver and gold, with long fingers that could create beautiful works of art. But now those same fingers were dirty from building weapons and fortifications. "Captain Morrison," Jorik said, his voice like music played on metal strings, "my people have been discussing something. Before you arrived, we thought that our choice was simple: surrender or die. You showed us there was a third option." "What option is that?" Jake asked. "Fight back," Jorik replied. "But not the way the Vrak fight. They use strength and fear to control others. You taught us something different. You taught us to use our minds." Jorik pulled out a device that looked like a work of art, but was actually a communication system. "We have been talking to resistance groups on occupied worlds throughout Vrak space, for they were hiding and hoping to survive until rescue came. Now they are learning what you call guerrilla warfare." Dr. Collins leaned forward with interest. "What exactly are they doing?" Everything then answered with something that might have been pride in his voice. "The Kithira are using their knowledge of trade routes to cut off Vrak supply lines. We know every merchant path, every fuel station, every repair facility in our space. The Vrak ships need those resources to keep fighting." Jorik continued the explanation. "The Morvic are sabotaging the weapons and equipment the Vrak forces to build. A laser cannon that explodes when fired. Armor that falls apart in battle. Ships that break down in hyperspace. And the Zilani?" Jake asked. Susan Wright smiled grimly. "The Zilani are the most interesting. They're using their scientific knowledge to create psychological warfare campaigns. They studied Vrak biology and found their weak points. Not physical weak points, but mental ones." She showed them a recording on her tablet. It was a Vrak warrior, one of the survivors from Admiral Crush's fleet. The big lizard-like alien was sitting in a Coalition prison cell, but he was not acting like the proud conqueror he used to be. Instead, he was rocking back and forth and muttering to himself. "What's wrong with him?" Jake asked. "The Zilani created a sound frequency that mimics the mating call of the Vrak's natural predator from their homeworld," Dr. Collins explained. "It turns out that even though the Vrak became the apex predators on their planet, they still have Genetic memories of being hunted. The sound triggers their deepest fears. Jake whistled softly. That's brilliant. And terrifying. The best part, Susan added, is that the Coalition is sharing all of this information with each other. They're learning that their different skills work better when they combine them. A communication alert sounded from the main console. Ryan Clark, who had been monitoring galaxy-wide communications, looked up with excitement. Captain, you need to hear this. We're getting messages from species all across the galaxy. They heard about what happened here, and they want to learn. Learn what? Jake asked. Why to fight back, Ryan replied. Sir, there are dozens of species out there who have been conquered or threatened by the Vrak or other aggressive empires. They all thought they were too weak or too peaceful to resist. But after hearing about the Coalition's success, they want to know if they can learn human tactics too. Dern walked to the big window that looked out over his damaged but defiant. City Captain Morrison, we need to ask you something important. Will you help us teach others what you taught us? Jake joined him at the window. In the streets below, Kithra children were playing a new kind of game. Instead of the gentle, artistic activities they used to enjoy, they were practicing teamwork and strategy. They were learning that the universe was dangerous, but that being smart and working together could overcome almost any threat. Ambassador, Jake said slowly, when we first answered your distress call, we thought we were coming to save 3 peaceful species from an aggressive enemy. We didn't realize we were going to change the entire galaxy. Change it how? Jorek asked. Jake turned to face all of them. His expression was serious, but hopeful. For millions of years, the galaxy has been divided into 2 kinds of species. The strong ones who conquer and take what they want, and the weak ones who get conquered. You're creating a 3rd option. What option is that? Susan asked, though from her smile, she already knew the answer. Species who refuse to be victims, Jake replied. Species who learn that being peaceful doesn't mean being helpless. Species who understand that sometimes, to protect the things you love, you have to be willing to fight for them. Dr. Collins was analyzing data from across Coalition space. Captain, the psychological impact of this victory is spreading faster than we can track. Oppressed species throughout the galaxy are starting to resist their conquerors. They're calling it the human effect. The human effect, Jake asked with amusement. The idea that any species can learn to be more dangerous than they appear, Amy explained. That intelligence and determination can overcome brute force. That peaceful species don't have to stay victims forever. A new communication came in from Lieutenant Tom Rodriguez, a Defiance intelligence officer who was working with Coalition forces throughout their space. Tom's voice was filled with excitement. Captain, you're not going to believe this. Just got word from the Vrak homeworld. They're having internal conflicts. Some of their commanders want to continue the war, but others are saying it's too dangerous. They're afraid of what other species might learn from the Coalition's example. Ouchie. Smile good. Fear makes people think. And thinking is the first step toward making better choices. Thurin approached Jake one more time. Captain, we have decided something. The Coalition is changing its name. We want to be called the Survivors Alliance from now on. Why that name? Jake asked. Because you taught us that survival is not about luck or strength, Thurin replied. It is about choice. The choice to keep fighting when everything seems hopeless. The choice to learn and adapt and grow stronger. The choice to help others make the same choice. Jake looked around at the faces surrounding him. Humans and aliens, warriors and scientists, artists and engineers. All of them united by a single idea that no one had to be a victim if they were willing to fight for their freedom. In that case, Jake said, I think it's time we started teaching the galaxy what Earth learned a long time ago. That the strong don't always win, but the smart almost always survive. Outside the window, the first ships of what would become the Survivors Alliance fleet were taking off from Kithra Prime. They were heading to other worlds, to other species, other battles. But this time, they were not going as victims or conquerors. They were going as teachers. 6 months after the battle at Kithra Prime, Admiral Kresh sat in his command chair and stared at reports that made no sense. What had started as a simple conquest was now a nightmare that kept getting worse every day. The Vrak Empire was losing the war, but not in any way Krish understood. His fleets were not being destroyed in great battles. Instead, they were being eaten alive by 1,000 small cuts. Supply ships disappeared between systems. Communication networks went down for hours at a time. Weapons exploded during testing. Food supplies were poisoned. Even his own warriors were starting to question orders. Admiral Commander Vex said as he entered the bridge, "We have lost contact with 3 more occupied worlds. The resistance movements are spreading faster than we can stop them." Kresh growled deep in his throat. How is this possible? Is it our species that never fought back before? The Cathera used to surrender when we showed up. The Zalani would hide in their laboratories. The Morvik would weep and beg for mercy. They are different now, Vex replied carefully. They have learned things from the humans. They work together in ways we cannot predict. They attack our weak points instead of trying to match our strength. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison stood in what used to be called the Coalition War Room, but was now the command center of the Survivors Alliance. The room buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species coordinated the largest resistance movement the galaxy had ever seen. Ambassador Thurin was no longer the frightened diplomat who had begged for help 6 months ago. He moved with purpose and spoke with authority as he planned operations across 17 star systems. His crystal-like features had grown harder, like diamond formed under pressure. Captain Morrison, Thurin said as he approached Jake, we have received the final reports from our agents inside Vrak space. The Empire is ready to collapse. Their warriors are afraid to go on missions. Their commanders are fighting each other. Some of their worlds are asking to surrender before we even attack them. Dr. Amy Collins looked up from her analysis station with satisfaction in her eyes. Captain, what we are seeing is evolutionary pressure in real time. The Vrak evolved to be apex predators on their homeworld, but they never learned to adapt when they met something they could not simply overpower. And now they are facing something they have never encountered before, added Jorik, the Morvik engineer, who had become one of the Alliance's best tactical planners. An enemy that grows stronger every time it is attacked. Jake nodded as he studied the galaxy map in front of him. Green lights showed worlds that had joined the Survivors Alliance. Yellow lights marked worlds in rebellion against their conquerors. Red lights showed Vrak strongholds that were still holding out. But every day, more red lights turned yellow, and more yellow lights turned green. How many species have joined the Alliance now? Jake asked. Commander Susan Wright consulted her tablet. 47 species have joined officially. Another 32 are fighting their own liberation wars, using tactics we taught them. The Vrak Empire has lost over 60% of its territory. The door to the command center opened, and Major Chris Parker entered with a grim smile on his scarred face. Captain, I have news from the Vrak homeworld. You're going to want to hear this. He activated the main display screen. It showed the interior of what looked like a Vrak government building. Vrak officials sat around a large table arguing in their hissing language. The computer translated their words into English. The humans have infected the entire galaxy with their madness, one Vrak was saying. Species that should be slaves are acting like predators. Our warriors are afraid too. Leave their ships. We should negotiate, another voice suggested. Find terms they will accept. Negotiate, roared a third voice. This was Admiral Kresh, who had traveled to the homeworld for this emergency meeting. We are Vrak. We do not negotiate with prey. Then what do you suggest? The first voice demanded. We have lost more territory in 6 months than we gained in the previous 50 years. Our empire is crumbling. Jake muted the recording and turned to address everyone in the command center. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the moment we have been working toward. The Vrak Empire is ready to surrender, but they do not know how. What do you mean? Darren asked. Their entire culture is built on being the strongest, Jake explained. They have never learned how to admit defeat because they have never been defeated before. They would rather destroy themselves than surrender. Dr. Collins was studying psychological profiles of Vrak leadership on her computer. Captain, I think I understand what you were getting at. The Vrak need a way to surrender that does not make them feel weak. Exactly, Jake replied. I think I know how to give them that. Lieutenant Ryan Clark activated the galaxy-wide communication system. Captain, you are broadcasting to every ship and world in Vrak space. Jake's voice carried across the void. To reach millions of Vrak warriors and civilians. This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth, speaking to Admiral Kresh and all Vrak forces. We know you are listening. On the display screen, they could see Admiral Kresh lean forward in his chair. Admiral Jake continued. Your empire is defeated. Your worlds are in rebellion. Your warriors are demoralized. You have two choices now. You can fight until every Vrak in the galaxy is dead, or you can learn to be something better than conquerors. Transmission from the Vrak homeworld showed heated discussion around the meeting table. Admiral Kresh was arguing with other officials, his voice getting louder and more desperate. We will show you the same mercy you showed to the species you conquered, Jake said, and his voice was cold as space itself. None. The Vrak officials fell silent. Unless, Jake continued, and now his tone changed to something warmer, you choose to become something different. The Survivors Alliance is not built on conquest or domination. It is built on the idea that every species has the right to determine its own future, even yours. Admiral Kresh stood up from his chair. What are you offering, human? I am offering you the chance to survive, Jake replied. Not as conquerors, but as members of a galaxy where strength is measured by how you protect others, not how you destroy them. The Vrak Admiral was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. And if we refuse? Jake's answer was simple and final. Then you will learn what happens when 47 species who used to be victims decide to make sure you can never hurt anyone again. Dr. Collins had been monitoring Vrak communications across their empire. She looked up with amazement. Captain, Vrak commanders throughout their space are ordering their fleets to stand down. They are abandoning occupied worlds and retreating to their core systems. They are more afraid of us than they are of admitting defeat, Major Parker observed with satisfaction. The final message from Admiral Kresh came 3 hours later. His voice was transmitted to every world in the galaxy, and his words would be remembered for generations. This is Admiral Kresh of what was the Vrak Empire. We surrender. We do not understand these humans or their allies. They fight like demons but show mercy to prisoners. They destroy our fleets but offer to rebuild. Our worlds. They are unlike anything we have ever encountered. Kresh paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. We have learned that there are things in this galaxy more dangerous than Vrak warriors. We have learned that strength without wisdom is meaningless. We asked to learn what these humans know about survival. Jake's response became the founding principle of what historians would later call the New Galactic Order. Admiral Kresh, this is Captain Morrison. We accept your surrender, but more importantly, we accept your request to learn. The galaxy has room for everyone who chooses to be protectors instead of predators. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed in ways no one had imagined possible. The Survivors Alliance grew into the largest peaceful federation in galactic history. Former enemies became allies. Species that had been victims became teachers, passing on the lessons they had learned from humanity. The Vrak, humbled by their defeat, proved to be surprisingly good students. Their strength and military knowledge, guided by human wisdom and coalition compassion, made them powerful protectors of weaker species. And somewhere in the depths of space, new distress signals began broadcasting. But these carried a different message than the desperate plea that had first brought humanity into galactic affairs. They carried hope. This is the Survivors Alliance. If you are facing extinction, if you are being oppressed, if you need to, learn how to fight back. We are here. We'll teach you what we learned from the humans of Earth, that survival is not about being the strongest. Is about being the one who refuses to give up. The galaxy had learned that when Deathworlders decide to share their knowledge, the universe becomes a more dangerous place for tyrants and a safer place for everyone else. And in the end, that made all the difference. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, New species were learning to defend themselves. Former victims were becoming protectors. And the cycle of oppression that had plagued the galaxy for millions of years was finally beginning to break. Not bad for a species. From a death world, he said to himself with a smile. The stars seemed to twinkle in agreement.